Many people were confused why Apple released the 10th generation iPad a few weeks ago, mostly because of its unimpressive upgrade for the $449 price tag that it costs. It's $120 more than the iPad 9th generation, which is still on sale, and it's $150 less than the iPad Air 5. I mean, really, who's going to buy this antiquated device? Well, if this sounds like you or someone you know, prepare to be enlightened because I'm going to drop some knowledge not only why the iPad 10th generation exists, but why it's the best upgrade choice for owners of the iPad Air 3. Let's get started. Guys, what is going on? My name is Mike Caputo, and if you are new here, I help people make the best purchase decisions when it comes to their tech, and honestly, the 10th generation iPad is the perfect subject for discussion. Because on the surface, no pun intended, the iPad 10th generation features the much-loved industrial design and the bright, bold new colors, but in positioning and context to the other iPad lineup, it is very confusing, especially when considering the price tag compared to the iPad 9th generation, which is $330, or again, the more powerful iPad Air 5 for $599. Now, to plant the seed now, Apple knows the length of time that customers keep their iPad, the life cycle of the device, and their upgrade path, and they know what features are important to attract both new and current owners when considering the iPad. Now, for this video, I'm referring to owners of the iPad Air 3 because for reasons that we're going to talk about throughout the video, I'm going to highlight the marketing and pricing psychology that Apple is using to make the iPad 10th generation a compelling upgrade to owners of the iPad Air 3. And with everything else in life, context matters. So why don't we start by discussing the feature set of the iPad 10th generation to see why it is truly a worthy upgrade to the iPad Air 3. The 10th generation iPad is available in 4 different colors: blue, pink, silver, and yellow, and it has 2 different storage configurations coming in at 64 gigs and 256 gigs, which cost $449 and $599 respectively. Now, you can either choose to add 5G to your device for an additional $150, which is a really common price point that Apple has on all their non-Pro iPads. It's $150 to add 5G. The iPad 10th generation has a liquid retina display that has a resolution of 2360 by 1640, coming in at 264 pixels per inch, which is the same screen size, density, and resolution as the more expensive iPad Air 5 and slightly larger than the iPad 9th generation. With a peak brightness of over 500 nits, the display will look good in most lighting situations. However, if you're outdoors or working in bright lights, know that the screen is going to get a little bit washed out. The display on the iPad 10th generation is neither fully laminated nor does it have the oleophobic coating, which leaves a small perceptible gap between the glass and your finger or a lot of fingerprints on the display. And just like the iPad Air 3, it features True Tone, which matches the color temperature of the display to the room's ambient lighting that you see there. Now, before we talk about the other features of the iPad Air 10, if you like this type of content, you want to get more content like this, including my full review of the Magic Keyboard, Folio, and figuring out whether it's worth $250, or if any other kind of less costly alternatives exist, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that notification button right down there so you can get notified when that content comes out, because that'll be coming out soon. Now let's talk about the processor. The iPad 10th generation is powered by Apple's A14 chipset, which features a 6-core CPU containing 2 high-performance and 4 high-efficiency cores, as well as a 4-core GPU. Now, comparatively speaking, it is very similar to the A12 Bionic from the iPad Air 3, and it stands out in difference only having the 16-core neural engine in the A14, which improves machine learning and AI functions that you might be using your iPad with and some of the apps that you have there. As for cameras, the iPad 10th generation has a single 12-megapixel camera on the back and a wide-angle 12-megapixel horizontal camera on the front, which is located along the long side of the iPad. Now, this positions you to have more flexibility whether you're taking video calls because of its natural positioning, you're not looking down and over to the camera, and it's particularly useful for those of us who like using their iPad as a camera on occasion. I promise I don't do this all the time. Now, this is a considerable upgrade over the iPad Air 3 because it does have an 8-megapixel rear sensor and a 7-megapixel front-facing camera. So on paper, the iPad 10th generation has an incrementally better display depending on what things are important to you than the iPad Air 3, as well as having parity when it comes to processing of that device, and it has a significantly better camera system. Now, you might think that comparing the iPad 10th generation to the iPad Air is really not a fair comparison because they are different tablets, they're different classes, and they're solving 2 different problems at 2 different price points. Well, I would say let's hold that thought because we should keep in mind when Apple introduced the iPad 4 in 2020, they also introduced a $100 price increase. So the tablet went from $499 for 64 gigs to $599. So if you bought the iPad Air 3 in 2019 for 64 gigs, you paid $499. So the pricing difference between the 2 tablets at $499 and $450 is not necessarily as wide as you think. So in other words, when you compare the prices of the iPad Air 3 with 64 gigs of storage to an iPad 10th generation with the same amount of storage, it's not an unreasonable comparison. Now this, from my perspective, is as intentional as it could be, as Apple is clearly targeting iPad Air 3 owners, as they are likely the customer that Apple wants to upgrade with this iPad 10th generation. And when you take into consideration that you can still use your Apple Pencil 3 that you purchased with your iPad Air 3, what was once an opaque picture of why Apple released this device starts to get a lot more clear. Now let's review the numbers. If you bought an iPad Air 3 in 2019, you paid $499 for the tablet with 64 gigs of storage. Maybe you bought an Apple Pencil, cost you an additional $100, and you purchased the iPad Keyboard Folio for $150. This set you back $750 before tax. Now, if you're looking to upgrade this year, it's completely reasonable. That price is a strong consideration for you. I mean, think about where we're at now in terms of the economy. When comparing the iPad 10th generation with 64 gigs of storage at $449, it comes in several fun colors. The fact that you do not need to buy an Apple Pencil in order to use this. If you want to buy the Magic Keyboard for $250, the total price it's going to cost you is $699, meaning that you can upgrade to the newest quote-unquote entry-level iPad that by name alone is a downgrade, but it is superior in almost every aspect. You're spending $50 less in 2022, 2023 to upgrade to a similarly equipped iPad as you did in 2019. Where do I sign up? Now, maybe that upgrade path isn't reasonable to you and you aren't shopping on price alone. Hey, you want to stay with the same iPad class, I got you. Upgrading to the new iPad Air 5 with the same configuration will cost you $100 more than it originally did, coming in at $599 for the tablet alone. The Apple Pencil that you have, it's not going to work with the iPad Air 5, so you need to drop an additional $130 for the Apple Pencil 2. Now, since you have a keyboard, but that keyboard will not work, you do need to buy a new keyboard, and that keyboard is the Magic Keyboard, which is $300, a full $50 more than the Magic Keyboard Folio. So if you want the advanced features that are standard in the iPad Air 5 that are not available in the iPad 10th generation, like the oleophobic coating, the fully laminated display, the desktop class M1 processor, and a USB-C interface that's faster, it's going to cost you $330 more than the 10th generation iPad. Now, I don't know about you, $330, it's not enough money that you can sneeze at and say, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and drop out just $330. Because it is significant, especially when you consider context of where we are in terms of society and the economy. It's enough to make you think twice about that purchase. So to summarize, the iPad 10th generation is squarely targeted at the iPad Air 3 owners for the following 3 reasons. First and foremost, it has a near feature parity with the current iPad Air 3, allowing for owners who shop on features a straightforward comparison to those two devices. Second, the iPad 10th generation is competitively priced to where owners of the iPad Air 3 walk away pleasantly surprised to see an iPad with feature parity and storage configurations cost less than what they paid. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, what if I could just maybe spend even less money and go to the iPad 9th generation? So I think there's a little bit more pricing psychology here where Apple's thinking about like the new and improved iPad Air 10, the bold colors that are kind of compelling people to make that choice towards the iPad Air 10 the iPad 10 versus the iPad 9th generation. I do think it is possible that people downgrade to that lowest version, but I don't really think it's going to be that significant of a number. Now, third and finally, Apple has created enough pricing tension between the more powerful iPad Air 5 and the iPad 10th generation, where it is strong enough to make potential buyers who are using pricing as a filter criteria to make their purchase reconsider the missing features if it's worth the additional $330. Guys, thank you very much for watching my video on 3 reasons why the iPad 10th generation is going to replace the iPad Air 3. Let me know if this video resonated with you down in the comments below, and if you are brand new to the iPad or you're rediscovering your iPad and you want to learn more about it, I have a playlist here which will show you all the latest tips and tricks. My name is Mike, and I will talk to you in the next one.